where we have the really nice sinuous lines, the Art Nouveau kind of organic shapes. But then we also have kind of the contrast of that with the Art Deco, more geometric forms that we're looking at and shapes that we're looking at and designs. So stained glass today, the contemporary artists are really taking it into a new level and thinking about what that stained glass might look like in other forms, like as a house, or some of Henri Matisse's work where it's more organic shapes. A lot of artists like Marc Chagall experimented with stained glass as well. So it's really just kind of a fun and playful medium that we can apply to our jewelry work. So if we're looking at the world of jewelry, stained glass makes me think of the plique-à-jour enamel technique. So that's basically you're creating this stained glass window effect with enamels. And enamels are like the glass that you fuse to the surface. So with plique-à-jour, you're actually inlaying it in these pierced areas. And typically you'll like fill these negative spaces with the powdered glass, kind of like this. And then you'll put it in the kiln and it'll fuse into those little windows. So the start of this project is by piercing and designing. So I use this project to introduce piercing to my students and to help them come up with a design to use. So this is always something that we as artists need to practice. A lot of us know about piercing and it was one of the first things we learned to do as metal artists. So this is really something accessible to anyone, whether you've been doing jewelry for 40 years or whether you've only been doing it for 4 weeks. So this is something you can practice. I believe these images are from Lucy Walker Jewelry. She has some of those awesome tutorials online. And this is some of like the stuff from her first class on piercing that she shows. I just found these online, but different inspirations from like the natural world. So how I wanted to take this to a project to make it accessible and more accessible for my high schoolers was to kind of help guide them through a design and help them through the ideation process and coming up with what they want their imagery to be. And then as far as the enamel inlay, I teach about 32 students in my class. So I wasn't quite up for the challenge yet of trying to do traditional plique-à-jour. So next month, I'm going to show you how we did the color inlay with actually gel nail polish. And it's pretty cool, and how you can make it kind of suspend in there. But we do need to kind of keep that in mind, that we are going to be filling some of these negative spaces with that gel nail polish as we're designing, so you don't have super extra large spaces because it could like pop through. So here's some examples of stained glass inspired jewelry that I've found on good old Google. Lots of beautiful earrings. As I was helping my students design, I encouraged them to think about different orientations and how they could display their jewelry in different ways. I also love to give my students challenges if they want to go above and beyond to create like a set or a two-part design where you have multiple pieces. So if the project guidelines I gave for my students were, I wanted them to work kind of small. So like between 1/2 inch and 2.5 inches diameter, or kind of in the largest width. I wanted them to be inspired by a specific piece of stained glass or a part of it. I encouraged them to look at like famous artist work or work from art history books or contemporary things, and stay away from like the patterns that you can find online, just to, because I wanted them to make it more their own and more creative. I encouraged them to include at least 4 pierced areas. And then next month I'll demonstrate the inlay technique. So to get started, if you want to do this month, I encourage you to research some stained glass artwork that you like. And then I have some search terms for you if you want to take a screenshot. Save these images and then get inspired by these and start sketching. And I'll show you kind of this process and how I worked through that. And then you can use this as the inspiration or design for the pendant, or if you want to do earrings or whatever you want to make. And then I encourage them to come up with multiple designs. Whenever I have my students working on jewelry or even in drawing and painting, I have them come up with at least 3 thumbnail sketches for any project we do, or at least 3 different ideas. It can be the same exact idea, they just arrange it in slightly different ways. Because normally the students go in and they have a picture of exactly what they want something to look like at the beginning. And then they whine, they go, Ms. Devin, I really don't want to do 3 sketches, I just want to do this. And then I am the evil teacher who forces them to actually do all their sketches. And then they end up liking their last one the best because they've made those changes and kind of pushed themselves out of their comfort zone. So I encourage you as artists that when you're designing, do multiple sketches and see where one leads to the next, so that you can kind of push yourself for your ideas to grow. Because, and it can even be taking that first idea and like just modifying it slightly, like making one part a little bigger or rotating it a different way or changing the colors. But as you're sketching and designing, think about how you want the jewelry to be attached to the wearer. So make sure as you're designing you have a bail as part of your design. My suggestions were to do earrings or a pendant, just because, you know, especially with earrings, with the inlay technique, it's, you know, you're not quite as rough on earrings as you would be like a ring or a bracelet. And I encourage them to have at least one colored place that they'll inlay. As you're designing with like your lead lines or the lines between your stained glass areas, keep about 1/16 of an inch or at least like 1 millimeter in between, just to help support the inner part. I also, you know, stained glass, the leading is always the same, but if you want to change it, think about varying that line weight between the different sections for some visual interest, and then you can add some more metal into the design. You can think about also, if you like multiple designs, combining parts or inspirations from different pieces of jewelry. Also take some, you know, artistic freedom with this. If a form looks too hard to cut out or a shape looks too hard to cut out, just simplify it or change it some. You have artistic freedom to make those choices. I encourage you to use, you know, my students hate when I tell them to use rulers and compasses, but to make geometric designs is very helpful. And also, as you're designing, think about the outside shape of your design. Like, do you want it to end up as a circle, or do you want it to be more freeform or organic? As far as the open areas that you're piercing, in order to hold, we found that in order to hold the inlay more securely, having it like no larger than about 3/4 inches in any diameter really will help hold the color. It will hold it larger. It will just be very fragile and might pop, and is more likely to pop out. So here's some search terms, and I can come back to these later, that I gave my students to help as they're searching for their inspiration images, but I'll come back to those. I wanted to go ahead and like walk you through my process as I was designing kind of my example for my students. So I found these 3 images that I really loved. So for the first one was inspired by Islamic art. So for this one, I took just a little section that I liked out of that piece of stained glass. So I actually have that in my sketchbook right here. What I did was, and sometimes I'm cheap, and instead of buying tracing paper, I just use parchment paper or tissue paper. So then I just actually printed out my image and then found a little section that I liked and went in and just traced that little section so I could see that better. And then as I was designing, then I went in and made some of the areas of my design thicker and used more weighted line, as you can see on the right. And then I had some areas where it was thinner, just because I wanted to kind of play off those organic shapes that I really liked. You can see that I simplified some of those shapes Some of them have like notches in them, and I just wanted to simplify them into something round, or I combine different shapes. And then I worked kind of the bail, or how it's going to be attached to the person, into the design. So I added one of those curved lines to kind of help with that. Another idea is you could take like inspiration from a piece or a part of something or an object. So my mom's favorite flower are irises. So the design for this one, you had to go look at the Tiffany glass irises because they're gorgeous. So I kind of took inspiration from different parts of this to create my image. There wasn't just one iris that kind of stood out when I really looked at it. They're all just kind of, when you look at it really close, they're just kind of blobby organic shapes. So I picked one of the irises at the top that kind of stood out, and I traced that, simplified it, went in and thickened up some of the lines a bit in the design. And then I took some of the leaves design from the bottom area and copied some of those. And I just looked also at the general shape he used and just worked that into the design. And then the other one, I just love Frank Lloyd Wright. He is my favorite. Done like tour of all of his houses in Chicago, and so gorgeous. Anyways, they're so beautiful. He's so cool, like how he does all the furniture to match, to go with all the houses. He designs every single piece, kind of a control freak, but it worked out for him. So I just got inspired by a little piece of this, and I thought it would kind of be a nightmare for me to cut out all of those tiny itty bitty little geometric, teeny tiny little shapes and get those corners right. So I simplified some areas and colored some parts in. For this design, I'm just going to end up adding a little bit of color at the bottom and leave these white spots of the design as like open areas. So my idea for these is going to be earrings, and I'm going to have them be mirror image of each other. So then the next few slides, I kind of showed how I created my patterns. So I did a few like quick ugly sketches of these to get started, and then I started actually using like the tracing paper and a ruler to get it perfect. When you're creating your design, color the areas you want to be metal solid, and then I showed how you could just fold the tracing paper and retrace your design so you can get that mirror image, so you can have two. We can skip that last slide. That's just how I graded them. But anyways, so I am currently working on my Frank Lloyd Wright earrings right now. I'm working on piercing them. These I'm just making out of brass because school teacher, I can't afford gold, and I wanted that golden color, So right now I'm working on piercing these, and then next month I'll have them done, and I'll show you how to do the plique azure inlay in some of those little open areas. So to get ready for that, you want to finish piercing, do any metal surface kind of changes, like if you want to do a hammered texture, or if you want to have like a high polish at the end, go ahead and get it to that stage. File all your edges, all that stuff. Do any of your major forming and bending of the metal, anything that would really like jostle stuff. And next month we'll be able to actually inlay. I'll bring all the different colors and the UV cure resin. If you want to be ready to do it next week, you can just literally go on Amazon and Google like gel nail polish kit, like UV gel nail polish kit, and you can find one with a bunch of colors for like $30. You could also, so the inspiration was this: Dallas sells a like UV resin enamel kit that an artist has put together, and it's actually, they've tested it a lot. They've designed it for this inlay. So I'm not sure if it holds up to polishing or wear better. But once, I tried it out with my students and went through this process, they were like, this is kind of like when I do my nails and like when I get my nails done, and I'm like, you're right, it really is. Let's see if this works. So we did that partially because we wanted a bunch more colors and they had a lot of fun colors. When you're looking for the nail polish, I like to find ones that are the transparent ones. I think the opaque ones look kind of plasticky. It's not my preference. I like when the light shines through a little bit, but I'll post a link to some of the ones I purchased in the comments of the live stream Facebook today when I get home, so that you guys can just click it. But that's it. So I hope that little inspiration helps you start thinking outside the box and thinking of other places to find inspiration for your jewelry practice in your everyday world. So if you're sitting at church on Sunday and there's, a beautiful stained glass window, you could start sketching on your little program what like a little part of it that you like. You're still listening. It helps you. Yeah, pay attention better. Start sketching little designs that you like. Or next time, you're watching Antiques Roadshow and you see they found their Tiffany lamp, sketch out some of those ideas. Just inspiration's all around you for your jewelry. You don't have to do the whole stained glass window. Just pick a little part that you really are attracted to the shapes of. So that's it. Does anyone locally have any questions? Okay. Cool.
Actually, I'm kind of thinking that this would be a really useful technique for lower cost jewelry than gold. Lower costs, gold is the standard. Because traditional enamels, you have to be careful about what they bind to, right? And so enamels that will bind to copper or sterling do not necessarily bind to brass. And they definitely don't bind to steel. You have to get a different series. At least from what I've read at the Thompson, so I haven't bothered to experiment. But that way you can get that gold look without having to have a whole new series of transparent enamels.
Yeah, so it's fun. So if you have kids, this is something fun that you can do with them too. You don't even have to do it with piercing. You could actually just like stamp out a blank circle and give them some nail polish and let them paint right on the surface, and it'll, as long as you sand the surface first, it'll bond to that. But I'll actually demonstrate that process and how you make it like float in the middle without like sticking everywhere and being a big blobby mess. So I'll show that next month. But anyways, thank you guys so much for coming and staying and tuning in. And the end. Okay. Clapping makes it weird.